Hey everyone, and welcome back to Concentration Check. This is PriorPlay's weekly podcast, coming available on YouTube and now Anchor. I'm Wyatt.
I'm Tony.
I'm Shay.
Uh, just real quick, just want to thank you, Shay, for being back with us for another week.
Love being here.
I think today we're actually talking about a topic that's pretty important to you, Tony, which is combat encounters, when to put them in, how to balance them mechanics wise, and everything else, right?
Right. There's a lot, in my opinion, that goes into creating the encounter. A lot of it has to do with the story and your overall theme of the combat encounter.
Now, when do you think it is pertinent to put in, I guess, a combat encounter? When do you think it's good to ramp them up, difficulty wise? I mean, I'm sure for the big bad evil guy, you're going to have a very strenuous and difficult encounter. Shay, when would you actually like ramp up, I guess, the frequency of combat, or when do you think is a good time to kind of start, and how would you start off, and like would you open up a campaign with combat, or how would you just do anything?
Okay, so for most campaigns, the way we start out with, recently I've been starting off with some newer characters. So just doing those opening combat, those opening fighting sequences helps people try to learn their characters, learn their classes and everything. So it helps them out and helps me out to understand the way that they are operating. So teaches them the class, teaches me how they see their class. I like to do it straight out the gate.
Right?
I'd say I agree in that aspect. You kind of want to, especially in the first session, you want to see what your players are capable of, essentially. You know, where's their strengths, what do they do, what do they forget to do in combat, and kind of help them out so that they can progress in their D&D adventure.
See, I like to think of it as a way to get misconceptions about classes off the table. Most people think that a cleric is just a heal tank, but a cleric can smack around most enemies and has the defenses to really frontline. Same thing with a druid. I mean, we see in our campaign how our druid, I mean, not directly is she causing damage, but she's bringing forth summons and everything else to do damage for her on her behalf. And, I mean, as well as you have fighters that can function as tanks as well as DPS. And then, I mean, some classes are pretty straightforward. You can understand what a rogue does. You can understand what a wizard or a sorcerer or warlock does. But I think that it's kind of getting out and breaking the mold and kind of figuring out not how your class operates, but how your character operates is really a really big component in combat itself, especially in the first session.
And then you get to see how the players also interact with each other and coordinate their attacks and what they're going to do. Sometimes they're going to encounter, they think everyone's on the same page, and no one has any clue of what's going on. I've had that happen to me multiple times before.
You're right. But back to what Wyatt was saying, if you get the way 5th edition works is people are able to operate more as what they want to be, as opposed to what their class or race or anything defines them as being. So you get a lot more ingenuity, a little bit more diversity. You can play what you want to play as races that don't necessarily lock you into a specific mindset or a specific character base or race base.
The only thing I'm worried about that is, especially with new players, they do that. They lock themselves in. They say, okay, this is what a cleric does, or this is what a fighter does, or this is that. And it can lead to be a little bit frustrating as a DM when their fighter or their monk can do something that's really cool, but they only see it as just a one-dimensional. And I get kind of frustrated because I want to say, like, oh, you can do this, this, and this, but I also don't want to metagame at the same time, you know?
Yeah, it becomes very difficult to start maneuvering around, especially if the person wants to only be that up front close and a combatant fighting up close, and that's all they see. They don't see that they can actually grapple the opponent as a monk or as a fighter, and they just um, swing their sword and they just see, oh, that's all I do.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I would say, there's a lot of really hidden mechanics like grappling for one that people just don't explore because there's not the amount of damage on the table. They don't see that amount, right? I mean,
True.
what do you think?
Fifth edition is actually really cool because where they're in fourth edition or 3.5, there was the support mechanic where they are healing people, they're boosting their attack power and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth edition operates in this weird, like, yes, I get to heal you, but that's not the only thing I'm focusing on. Clerics are not just a healing class. Paladins are not just a healing subclass. It's just a little thing that they can do in addition to beating them over the head really hard with a hammer or something like that.
Now, in terms of newbies, again, is I would like to recommend for parties, because I prefer parties around 3 to 5. So we'll just take that average as 4, like meet in the middle. And I like to do, usually one tank, one support or healer, but can also function as damage, and 2 really DPS damage focused people. And I think that's a decent balance, especially in terms of the party and how you give out rewards, how you give out magical items. Really, as long as you have, like, in terms of DPSs, one person is physical, one person is magical or whatever else. And I mean, I'm not gonna like force someone to play something, but that's my ideal setup because it's easier for you to give out magical items, it's easier for you to give out rewards, and it's easier for people to track their progress and to know that yes, I am progressing in my skills as a player. I'm getting better. I can prevent flanking. I'm choosing the right feats. Or I'm making my character into a badass essentially.
Yeah, for me, I love the party dynamic of put anything in a party and I'll just build something, not necessarily to just go around the party, but to make it as a fun interaction at the same time of not making it too easy. And sometimes it does come up where it does become very easy because if you start throwing in like high health people and all you have are wizards and they can just run up, face check all of them and just essentially shut down all the wizards, because if they don't take a specific feat or if they don't move away, they're just going to keep getting whittled down.
Yeah, I agree. But the cool thing about the 5th edition is that organic growth. The fact that you can do a subclass or a branch off from your main vision of where your character should be, and you can kind of help balance out the group. So if you wanted to be the paladin with a little bit of cleric or druid just so they can get that healing word, that really helps out the whole party, but it also helps your character grow and give you a little bit more backstory, a little bit more party interaction.
Shay, you seem like you're a spokesperson for 5th edition right now. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that if Wizards has contacted you in order to kind of promote their game, I would like some of that money as well. But what I'm saying is you're talking a lot about how 5th edition changes things. So I want you to kind of give me a scenario, especially a combat scenario, of how 5th edition differs from, let's say, 4th edition. I know 3.5 was ages ago, but me and you started on 4th edition together. So I would like to know, like, why 5th edition is so much better than
So,
others.
4th edition created a whole lot of specialized classes. You could start off as a druid or a warden, and you can either go to tank or healer. There were really only like 4 or 5 specific styles of play that you can actually do in 4th edition. Now, 5th edition, they pretty much got away with, they threw away healing. All you got to do now is, it's a lot more roleplay heavy. So instead of just being that guy that focuses on making sure everyone's at full health or everyone's fully stacked and fully bodied, you are now still able to attack, and you can try to figure out the reason why the fight is happening the way it is, and try to get a little bit more in depth with what the dungeon master is, the reason why the dungeon master is presenting the fight the way it is.
Now, Tony, you actually come from a Pathfinder background, and I've played a little bit of Pathfinder. So, and from what I'm seeing is that Pathfinder kind of follows the same 4th edition system, where it's, let's give these guys a bunch of classes for them to choose from, but in reality, like, they're still following that same play style.
Yeah, it essentially is a lot of options are open for you when you're playing in Pathfinder. You have multiple different paths you can go. You can make a crazy strong character, whereas in 5e, you're now, it doesn't seem like overly broken, but it's also not super weak to the point where it's boring or you don't feel like you're achieving anything.
Right. Well, okay, so I guess we kind of got the aspects of why 5e is kind of better, and, you know, the things for the newbies. So I guess I'm tired of running my mouth. Why don't you kind of, you know, take the reins in this part and kind of guide us into the direction that you'd like to talk about?
So the first thing I like to do for encounters and creating them is I like to think of, what's the story going to be about? Are they going to have fun with the encounter? And can they actually fight the encounter? I like to run encounters on my own with the players in mind, kind of using their characters to interact in the world as I would see them or how I would move them. And essentially run it through a couple times, see if they succeed or if they completely fail. Then maybe throw out that idea or keep it in there and see how they actually work it out.
So, I believe that every fight is winnable. It just depends on what questions you ask. It's not on how hard you can hit, but how smart that you as a player can think. And how smart that you would perceive your character can think. What do you think?
So, yeah, as long as you are trying to roleplay as your character and your character can grow through your own specific intelligence and just the general gameplay, that's what you want to go with. However, just remember your character is also whatever their stats are. So when we're rolling like nature checks or survival checks, and it's because a river is flowing a certain way, you roll super low, but general intelligence realizes that you need to go the direction X, but because you're just an idiot and you decide that direction Y is the way you need to go, make sure that you're playing it the way you should play it as opposed to the way you feel like it needs to be played.
See, and that's why when I design my combat encounters, I always like to put in at least 3 different ways of beating it. Always the violent section, the non-violent section, and the hybrid section. I remember there was one time where the party had to go get this specific object from a merchant in the woods. And because he was a merchant traveling with a large amount of gold, he had about 25 people there who were guarding him. So the party went in, they scoped it out, they came back, and they decided, okay, let's take the stealthy way in. And somewhere along the line, that kind of got messed up. So the party begins trying to withdraw, trying to distract, and then our druid, of all people, walks up, casts Charm Person on the main person in the camp, asks for what she's looking for, asks for him to pretty much have the men stand down. He does it, and they leave. Now, am I saying that they won't come to regret that later on down the road? Yes, I am saying that because they have not met them again ever since. But I was very much impressed with her use of ingenuity and her kind of creativeness, as it was, instead of we need to kill everyone until they're dead. Let's, find a route to one, accomplish the mission, and two, get out alive.
Yeah, absolutely. If you give your players and characters A, B, and C, and they say, "Well, screw that, we're gonna go with D," and it makes sense, by all means, go for it. If they choose the fourth option and it circumnavigates everything that you've planned, and it mentally works, that means your characters are learning, and that means that they're coming up with great solutions to problems that you're creating.
Now, how would you kind of design your encounters? Would you kind of describe it as, this is really straightforward, let's do this, or do you like to get more kind of creatively focused, or like choose your own adventure type deal?
Generally, I like to look at it as if they fail a situation, like if they roll particularly low on a percentage dice or something, then they're going to run into options A, B, or C. But if they're just super lucky and they get through the woods, the evil wood encounter, then they don't have to fight those things. Now, the cool thing about that is now I have these specific encounters in order for them to run into later, should they go back through that woods or they go into another area. This way, I don't necessarily have to design another battle, but they win the encounter, and I still have stuff for later.
Okay.
How about you, Tony?
I think I've only really made very linear combat situations. I think the only one I really did not go too linear on was these giants, I think they were.
Ogres.
Yeah, the ogres. And I took a more roleplay heavy aspect of it, of them bickering of who's going to get to eat the little man who stands in front of them.
And you kind of played that so well that even though it was a high challenge rating, the party was still able to get through it relatively easily.
Well, they have legendary stupidity for a reason, right?
Yeah, that's true. Okay, what is... sorry to cut you off. What were you going to say?
I was going to actually pose a question of what kind of encounters do you hate?
Encounters that I hate? Okay, two types of encounters. I hate encounters that are pretty much on rails. I hate encounters where it's, okay, fighter's going to swing his big sword. I'm going to make sure he doesn't die, and we're good. I like to have encounters that have a trick or two up my sleeve. So, an encounter where if it's a horror game-esque, there's a sigil on the ground, you're fighting this big bad monster, and you notice that as you chip away his health, that every time he hits you and chips away at yours, as your blood falls onto the sigil, it activates and it heals him. And just different kind of things there within, either traps set up or an ambush, or kind of even something more role play related, where it's more than just, okay, I need to kill these guys before I can move on. And the second thing I hate is where it's just it's the same amount, I guess, and I know that's kind of superficial, but I definitely feel like a party of 4 could fight a party that's double their size. I feel like if it's just around the same level or anything else like that, I don't like when there's either a medium-sized group, and I guess I'm kind of dumb and superficial for this, like I said, but either a lot of really weak things or not a lot of really strong things.
don't know. I'd have to kind of disagree with that last statement because when you have one strong thing and a bunch of other not so strong things, if they all frontline for that one strong guy, it makes it very hard to get past those guys without taking an exorbitant amount of attacks.
Well, I think that's where we get into the point with how DMs would do minion stats, essentially, where, yeah, I mean, they could take, they might have a high AC and they could take a couple swipes at you, but you hit them and they're dead. And I like to put in, minion creeps and minion monsters in my games a lot because it fills out the map, it makes the characters feel a sense of danger, and it also makes them feel that same sense of accomplishment once they're standing at the end in this battlefield with all these dead people in their wake. But maybe you might disagree with me as well, Shay.
So yeah, the way the rules are currently set up is slowly being whittled away at with your health and with specific expertise. It's really important to keep a mindset of where you are. So if you're walking into the first trap, and sure, it only does like 5 points of damage, and you've got 120 health, but you're also walking into the second, third, fourth trap, and you're constantly getting whittled down with that health. The second you get into that, the second you get into the combat where you're just fighting a level 2 encounter, it can mess you up. Just that slow whittle away is what actually kind of makes the current Dungeons and Dragons dangerous.
So would you say is that what you least like about encounters, or what would you what do you not like the least?
The thing I like the least is that you get from point A to point B and you don't do anything in between. If you run into a couple superficial monsters, that's really cool because they'll whittle down a little bit of your health. They'll do a couple bad things to you. And then by the time you have to fight the big bad, that's where the fact that you ran into that pack of kobolds that shot you a couple times with some arrows, the big bad and the kobolds together, that damage that they were dealing to you is what messes you up.
Okay. So then I would say my question is, what do you like least about how characters treat, or how players treat their characters in combat encounters?
If they rely too much on the long rest or the short rest, if they rely too heavily on that, and as a DM, if I allow them to, then that's going to be a problem. If after every major encounter they can pretty much go back to full health, then I personally am probably screwing up. Because there needs to be that sense of danger, the fact that they didn't try to back away from that evil necropolis and take a long rest, because they're just fine.
Right.
Then, yeah, it needs to happen. It needs to be that constant sense of danger, the fact that you're always surrounded by enemies.
Right. What about you, Tony? What do you think?
Well,
I mean, I guess why you kind of think about what you don't like, I will go ahead and say I hate people that kind of treat their characters with reckless abandon. Like you were saying, relying too much on the long rest and short rest. And this is where like my kind of RP style comes into play, where I want you to treat your characters as if they were real.
You.
Yeah. Or you. Yeah, I don't like people saying like, oh, I'll just write up another one, or I'll just do this, I'll just do that. That's jaded thinking, and kind of it makes me feel like you didn't really put effort into your character to begin with.
No, I agree. If someone just looks at it as, well, my character died, I'm going to look at my next character and try to min-max them to the extreme, what's the point? What was everything before this to accomplish?
Would you say that newer players do combat better than older players?
Absolutely. Some of the older players, they will look at a character and they will try to min-max the character to the extreme. They will try to make them as powerful as possible. And while it's really cool for that player in combat, it's not really that fun out of combat. They're not necessarily going to have that...
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, they're not going to have that little input for the Thieves Guild where they have that tidbit of information that's going to progress the story. They're not going to have a hookup with the guards where now they've got something that will hopefully help lead to the next round.
Right. I definitely think that while older players make combat faster, it's not just exactly as more fun.
True.
Did you figure out you're contemplating over there, Tony?
I really don't really have much to say about characters, how like people are treating their characters. I think as long as they're doing what they expect their character would do, I think that's kind of all fair game. If when they come to the table and they know their character is just a reckless person and just charges into combat.
Yeah, but and that's fine if their character is something like a barbarian or something, or their backstory is written in such a way that it would make this character a reckless person. But if you're just playing with like vets that can write up a new character in 2 minutes, and you have a wizard who's diving in the front lines and just slinging fireballs and everything else, that's kind of what irritates me, I would say.
So yeah, it's if there is a investment inside the character, that is really what I'm looking for. As a dungeon master, if my players see their characters as someone that is truly important to them, and they want that growth, then that is what I really want to have. That's what I really want to have happen.
And I think that's where it gets at to where they're treating it more as a video game versus a role-playing game. I think sometimes you can stray away just trying to look at the stats and trying to get all the numbers to max them out. When you start looking at that, then you're like, okay, well, I can just make another super strong character. It's fine. But if you're actually taking time to write the background, get attached to it a little bit and kind of see yourself in their shoes and kind of fill those shoes for the moment.
This is why I like rolling for attributes instead of a point-buy system. Because even if you are trying to min-max your character, yes, you can do it, but you're still going to have probably like an Achilles heel somewhere. And it just throws that little bit of randomness in there to make it such a more memorable character and more memorable encounters.
Yeah, when you're that super great barbarian and your dexterity is like 8, so you're a klutz, it's funny because everyone gets to laugh when you trip over that loose stone or something.
That sniper rock.
Exactly, that sniper rock. But it also helps the whole campaign kind of just progress forward because everyone is laughing with you to help grow.
Or when a child beats you in an arm wrestling contest and you're like, okay, well, I guess I lost that one.
I think we've all been there before.
That 45-year-old man that just fucking gets wrecked by a 12-year-old kid.
Yep.
Hey, it happens.
Orc kids are really strong.
Bud, tell me about it.
Is there anything else you kind of want to bring to the table, Tony?
I don't really have much else to say, at least for this session.
All right. Well, I think we will call it there then. We will close the books on this case. Shay, I would like to thank you again for being with us today. I'm Wyatt.
And I'm Tony.
And I'm Shay.
And we will see you guys next week. Make sure you guys follow us on all of our social media. That will be Twitter, Instagram, Amino, and even on Reddit if you're looking careful enough. Have a good day and keep those dice rolls high, folks.